Good morning. Good morning. I'm so tired. Welcome to Morning Talk with the Artist Forge. Becca and I are here today to say hi and talk to you guys about visual literacy. So, before we get started with the normal kind of morning introductions, how are you, Becca?
Awake.
Awake. That's a pretty
Otherwise,
good
pretty
description.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we got going for us this morning. I would love to hear a little bit. I was there, but I know not everybody could be there. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about everything that went down with your presentations with Adobe.
There was some art made. That was something that went down. But it was a 2-day stream. First day, we went into some photo compositing for environments, built over a 3D base. Really simplistic, like not requiring intense 3D skills. I know that 3D looks really intimidating, especially to like photographers or illustrators, people who don't haven't ever used software like that. So I just wanted to kind of show how to like use the most simple, primitive way of combining that with illustration and with photo work. And so that was pretty cool. And second day, went into a little bit of character design. Didn't finish everything, but went through most of the techniques that I use when using photo assets and some illustration to build up fantasy characters based on human character to start with, whether that's a photograph. I use 3D, but it could be a photograph. So just taking yourself for someone else or, a model, whoever, if you don't have like a special effects artist or something like that, and turning it into something freaky. So it was a lot of fun.
It was super great. I got to be there and watch like things happen as they happen. It was super cool to see your workflow. So if folks were not able to be there to learn from you, where can they find those streams?
Those streams are up on YouTube, either on the Adobe Creative Cloud channel or I think the Adobe Live channel.
Nice. Awesome. So good morning, Matt.
Good morning, guys. Sorry, I'm a little flustered this morning. Technology issues. Yeah, I know, right? So weekend was good. I'm refueling right now. Drove down to Massachusetts yesterday, 3.5 hours to go to a Roaring Twenties party at this estate garden party thing. So I had my full Peaky Blinders 3-piece wool suit on. I'm glad it was 90 and humid because I recognize just how absorbent wool is. So it was like a big armpit yesterday, but it was awesome. There was a ton of fun. So I was literally just loading pictures up now. I had a technology freak out, and I'm going to sort through them while we're sitting here talking.
Heck yeah. Good morning, Bassam. I didn't expect to have you with us today.
I just thought I'd drop in. I have like 15, 20 minutes, so I'll just say hello and maybe stick around without getting totally engaged, but just wanted to say hi.
Nice.
How's everyone?
Pretty tired. I hope everybody's weekend was good. I know our power went out yesterday, so I didn't have a chance to prepare as much in advance as I wanted to. However, we do have some really fantastic examples today to look at. So I want to start by saying good morning. If you are hanging out in the audience today, say hi. We want to know who is here so we can call you out by name and be excited to spend this morning with you as we talk about visual literacy. And on that note, just a little bit of a preview of what we have ahead of us today. So we've been focusing on subject matter as part of visual literacy. And last week we talked about the subject themselves. We're going to start focusing on things like body language and facial expression and costuming or clothing, depending on what terminology you want to use there, and how those things help us intuit or understand the purpose of an image, what it's meant to be for. And how we're supposed to feel about it. How do we interpret that? So today, body language is the main thing that we're going to be discussing. And for those of us who are photographers or who have been photographers at some point, we are super conversant with how body language affects the viewer and how we understand how the subject feels and what they're meant to be doing by body language. Posing is a big part of our skill set. So one of the things that we have to do if we are portraitists is to help somebody get into a position that is not only flattering, but also kind of communicative. And, from that perspective, we have a pretty good understanding of body language. But even beyond that, we have been viewing and interpreting body language from the time we were born. This is one of the great skill sets of humanity, is that we are able to read body language. In fact, most of our communication is not verbal. Most of our communication is through things like how somebody is standing. Are they fidgeting with their hands? Are they, wiggling their toes around in their shoe? Like, are their shoulders down and relaxed, or are they kind of up around their ears and defensive? And we understand these different changes in body posture and body language so well that we can see body language when there isn't actually any body language to be seen, meaning in non-human, we can anthropomorphize something to intuit body language out of that. And I'm actually going to show us that with a couple quick line sketches this morning with a simple circle and a line. And we are going to look and see how something that simple can actually still give us clues about body language and why. So then we're going to look at pieces of art, starting with one thing that's really super obvious, just to kind of get our palette open. And then we're going to look at a few more things and see what we can interpret based on how we see body language. So before we start looking at the imagery, though, I have a question, obviously, first for the panelists and then for everybody hanging out in the audience today who still haven't said hi, by the way. Don't hurt my feelings, okay? How do you guys think of body language? How do you approach that when you are making a piece of art? So Matt, I know, like, as a portraitist, body language is a big deal, and you're kind of sometimes coaching somebody or sometimes capturing what somebody's already doing. And then Becca, I know for you, this is something that often has to be built from scratch, right? You have to consider this as you're making a piece. So from your perspectives, how do you approach body language?
I think body language is this part of visual literacy that we have to think about all the time, that we're seeing and interpreting body language, right? Just as humans, we realize we're doing it all the time. It's how we interact, right? So it's understanding, right? This is when I was a bouncer, like a long time ago. You had to watch body language for everything. You had to watch hands, you had to watch all this stuff because things can happen out of nowhere. So you're always cataloging what people are doing, how they're fidgeting and whatnot. As a photographer, now it just communicates to me, is someone comfortable, uncomfortable? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they nervous? Right? And understanding what that body language is so that I can best approach and take the best picture of them that I can. So it could be that I have to calm them down. It could be that I have to perk them up, right? It could be that I have to draw them out of their shell because they're really closed down and nervous. So how do you do that? That's not necessarily picture related, but just human interaction related, to draw out the story that I want or draw out the emotion that I want. So it tends to be very reactive, and I'd like to say that it's the complete opposite of what Becca does, because that's the proactive. I've got to think about how to do this body language, and create it from scratch, and that's beyond me. I'm fascinated by it, because if someone said, act happy, I'd have no idea what to do. Like, am I happy now? Like, I don't know how to act happy except when I'm happy.
I think that's saying that, like, act happy thing is a great example, though, when working in photography, right? Like, what is it that truly makes an efficient means of directing when working with other humans? And like, yeah, so just act happy, that no one's going to know what to do with that. But if you say, make it situational, make it relatable when you are working with other people. Like, I know on the rare occasion that I do actually touch a camera with another human in the room, that tends to be my approach, is to lean into that more story building kind of narrative means of directing. Like, this is the situation, this is what's eliciting that happy feeling, like you've just opened the door and your boyfriend's there and you haven't seen him in 5 weeks and he's there with your favorite box of pizza, and like something like that, right? Because that's gonna touch that human element much more than be happy, for sure.
Totally. Yeah, that's the same kind of thing. You're using prompts for anything. Whisper ear, tell him this, right? All those sorts of things get those authentic reactions, or those authentic emotions, which translate into, hopefully, the body language that you're going for, or whatever scene that is. But yeah, that you have to create the environment for them to feel that emotion first before you can portray that emotion. Right? Is that generally it? I don't know. I'm throwing eggs at a wall. I'm like,
No,
I don't know.
that's entirely creating that environment for them to feel that emotion is like so concise. Perfect.
Yes, and I actually really love, Matt, that you brought up the fact that in your particular discipline, it's not just like, how do I put somebody in a body position that allows this to happen? It's actually, how do I relate to this person now in real time and use their body language to be able to tell how they're feeling? Because I'm not going to be able to help them get into this mindset or this feeling or this position if they're already closed off or defensive or whatever. So how do you use those skills beforehand, I think, is a really fantastic way to think about this too, from a pre-production perspective.
And it's knowing what you want, right? Knowing what's the image that you want, because someone might be closed off and that's the exact image that you want. You want to capture that rawness. You want to capture that fear or apprehension that someone might have. That might be the best thing. You don't have to do anything but press a button. But other people, if you're going for a different story, you might want to draw that out differently. And it's just being able to understand and be empathetic to where somebody is. And that's really, from a portrait standpoint, that's where I start, is just understanding the person in front of me without ever touching a camera, just understanding what is it that I'm dealing with, what might I have to do.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great thing to think about. And then from there, Becca, what is your, like, how do you think about body language when you go about creating a composition?
I mean, this is something that I feel like, at least for me, and even when I was acting as photographer, like, required a lot of study. And so, like, that's things like I love to pay homage to more classical art in my own work. And so it's a lot of times looking at other art and going through that kind of practice of why do I like this? What are they doing? What is the body telling me? How does the body even move this way? And that even is something that I'll do. A lot of it's like I'll just like act out stuff and like, or like hold up, my phone and like take a video to see how the body moves. Like, how does my face move? How does the musculature move? Or dance around in front of the mirror into weird, strange poses that I desire to put characters into, just to get an understanding of the human anatomy and to try to go through that kind of directorial narrative experience with myself, if I can't do it with another person, to be like, okay, what does this feel like? What does this look like? How does it work? And then we get to even the compositional aspects. What is the flow of the body and how does that apply then to the flow of the overall image from a compositional sense? Does it need to feel small? Does it need to feel big? What is the angle of the camera? What needs to be visible? What needs to be not visible? And that's this entire second part based first on the emotional aspect of the body.
Love that. So what happens to the body when we're feeling sad, when we're happy, when we're angry, when we're et cetera, et cetera? What do we do with ourselves? And of course, as Matt and Becca both mentioned earlier, some of that's environmentally based, right? What's actually happening in the scene and how is a person going to react to that? But even if you remove everything, there are common factors that we have that signal emotion and signal certain kinds of action that we have learned to see. And we're going to do an interesting exercise really quickly just to kind of prove that to ourselves. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a couple quick sketches that I just did that are a simple line. And we're going to see how just 2 lines, a circle and a line, can have emotion based on how we understand body language. So that didn't sound great.
Cats.
All right. So if you're in the audience today, what's happening here emotionally? Put it in the comments. What is the emotion of this?
Sadness.
All we need is the shape of a head and the curve of a spine, and we can read emotion in that. Even if it's not clear that this is a head or a spine, we will automatically put humanity onto the things that we see and interpret it based on what we know, right? So this is sad. What about this?
Surprise.
See that as surprise for sure. Anybody have any other suggestions on what this could possibly be?
There's fear, a little bit of moving back from something, right? I'm looking at it as if it were from the side. So there's this fear that's moving back, but same kind of, it's analogous to surprise, right? There's this
It's like where
moving
you
back.
you stop yourself, but your body's ahead of you type of thing, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that for sure. Also, what about this? Right? Imagine I'm the guy.
Superiority complex.
Sure, you could look at that as pride, superiority, right? Like chest out, chin up,
stand up. Nose
you know,
stand up.
shoulders down. And if we were to just really simply add a couple more lines here, let's bring Becca back. The cat's destroyed all the things.
Yeah, she broke my webcam.
Oh my gosh. Cats.
Cats.
All right, so maybe let's do one
Let's
more.
read Becca's body language right now.
Right.
About the cat.
Poor Becca. What's the potential emotion we could make out of just a few lines here? Oops. What about let's give some shoulders here.
Temper tantrum.
Temper tantrum.
Closed off.
What did you
Yeah.
say, Becca? Temper tantrum?
Temper tantrum. This is what my children do when they're mad.
Right. There's a
I thought
lot
it
of
was
different
Moses holding the 10 Commandments.
ways. The 10
Yeah,
Commandments.
definitely closed off, closed shoulders, closed arms, just closed off in some way.
Yeah, we don't need much. We don't need much in the way of body to interpret body language. It doesn't require much, whether that's closed off and it could be being upset or angry or throwing a temper tantrum, whether that's pride or surprise or sadness.
So
Those
go back
things.
to that one. Go back to the last one, Nicole.
This one?
No, the last one you drew yourself.
I drew all of them.
I know, but the one you did live,
Oh, this one.
that one. Okay, so all of you looked at it as if that person is facing you, and I can see how, what you described is because they're facing you. I see it as somebody facing away, kind of
Sure.
leaning over, and that would be either curious or caring, or those are the two words that came to mind, because he's leaning over, interested in something, whether to talk to a child or whether to be curious about something that way over there.
So based on where we see the figure, and you're absolutely right, we are going to interpret the body language that way. What if we went like this? Or what if we went like this?
Well, trying to look up the Empire State Building.
See, I see
mean,
it looking down, not
Sure,
up.
and-
That's
and you-
interesting.
Yeah, and you completely could. But either way, we import humanity onto this, right? Like we don't just see this as not being a person. We immediately are going to kind of push some kind of interpretation onto this and assume that this is body language and that it means something. So we have to understand that we're going to be doing that. Your audience is going to be doing that. They are going to be looking at, if you have a human or a humanistic or an anthropomorphized figure, they're going to be reading body language into that and interpreting what that means based on, the surroundings, based on what else is going on in the scene. That's going to be interpreted. And if you have a purpose of a scene that means one thing and body language that is contrary to that, then that leads to a different kind of interpretation, right? So all of these things are really important for us to think about as artists, even when we're not considering the technical pieces of, let's say from Becca's perspective or from an illustrative perspective, have we created the proper body language anatomically, meaning is the weight positioned over the feet in a way that's actually believable to somebody for them to be standing or moving the way that you have them moving. Like those things can also be read. We can kind of tell when something looks off because of how familiar we are with body language and with anatomy just in our daily lives. So we're going to start looking at some examples in a second, but I want to say good morning to Sarah. Hi, Sarah. So glad to have you with us today. All right, we're going to start looking at some imagery here, and we're going to start with something that's just super, super obvious, just to get a really powerful reminder of body language and why it's communicates so quickly intent and emotion and things like that. And if we look at an image like this, the body language here, those prompts are so annoying. The body language here is pretty unmistakable. I don't think anybody could see this and be like, this guy's going to come give me a hug. He's obviously very happy to see whoever is here. You're not going to assume that. Even if we were to, even if we were to remove facial expression, okay, even if that wasn't a thing, this is not a welcoming body language. This is not a friendly body language. This is very clearly antagonistic in some fashion. And we know that because of how familiar we are with how people move and what they do. Even if even if you were to start to remove other pieces here, you'd still see this kind of action. This is a violence of motion, right? And I just wanted to start with this one because of how unmistakable it is to kind of start us on one end of the spectrum so we could move through, because some of these other ones are actually going to take a little bit more interpretation. We're going to need to look at these and then intuit in a little bit of a different way. So I wanted to start us off with something that's really kind of unmistakable.
You know what's interesting is I'm looking at this
Sorry.
after you remove the face. No, it's fine. But just I was thinking that, okay, well, what if we take away the weaponry, right, and just look at the body? And it's reminding me a lot of bodybuilding.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, which I find even more interesting.
I think of drums,
Yeah, I could get drums out of it for sure.
especially somebody just going bong, 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 you know.
Yeah. But just anything that's then really truly emphasizing that dynamism and that musculature absolutely
For
reads
sure.
like action. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, there's like a lot of things happening. There's a forward tilt to the torso. The shoulders are down and powerful. Like the arms are in a really kind of, like dynamic movement. So, and then we can get into a lot of the smaller reads in body language here as well. Like look at the fist. There's a difference between holding something like this, right, and holding something like this. Even a difference in things like, are your knuckles standing out, right? Are they white? Are they clenched versus are they, these say two different things. And if you're not aware of those differences, you're going to create or guide body language that doesn't make sense. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is one of my favorite all-time pieces of art.
Good choice.
Oops, I'm going to switch back to here.
You guys have fun. I'm going to be leaving you. Bye.
Bye, Bassam.
Have a good day. So when we see, this is the Pieta by Michelangelo, when we see this, how does this body language communicate? If you're in the audience today, would love to hear from you. What do you think? What do you see here? How is this body language communicating? I have 2 pieces of gum on the table that are waiting for me to chew them later, and I want them now really bad, but it's so weird to talk with gum in your mouth.
I mean,
Come on,
clearly
friend.
there's the slack in the body, right? So you have this sense of profound exhaustion or death or whatever it might be, but the body is slack. The other is, so supportive and looking down, and you can tell by facial expression and just sagging the shoulders that there's this sadness, that there's this protection right? So I think, you're looking at a couple of different things here. There's comfort, and it's which way do you want to look? Overall, the image is one of, great sadness and despair. But I think you can break that down from perspective depending on which person in the image you are, which person in the sculpture you are. I'm either sad and dead, or I'm really sad and looking down on someone that is gone. I don't know. I think I'm not interpreting like this like an art professor, but what I see is just this profound sense of heaviness and sadness and slack and the end, right? And there's no tension of something coming next. It's just, this was the end.
And that's
the
what's so
feeling that I get.
beautiful. Yeah, like you don't need to be an art professor to feel that. And that's what makes this particular sculpture like so beautiful is that grief just comes across to anyone, I think, who looks at it. I don't think you can interpret it any other way if you're, a human being with feelings.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a couple things there, but unfortunately, this is not like the greatest image, so we can't zoom in. But if you ever have a chance to look at the Pieta in person or really great photographs close up, the mastery of form and body language and expression and like everything else obviously here is mind blowing when you can see things like the veins in the feet and everything else. It's just stunning. I had the opportunity to go through a photo book of it one time, and I was just like, oh, I am never going to do anything in my life that is as good as this single piece of art. However, I love, Matt, that you mentioned the heaviness of it. And this is not a body language thing, although the body language has been composed in such a way along with the situation to make this practicable. But this is the shape of this composition. So all the weight of it is at the bottom, right? So it's a very bottom heavy piece. It's obviously like pulling down. And everything that the sculptor did with the bodies was then, resulting in that composition. Which I think is a really important thing here. But, you mentioned a lot of the things, the slackness of the body of Jesus, in case folks didn't know, this is Jesus and Mary. The way she's holding him and you can see the armpit, right? Like everything here is completely slack. The way his hands and his feet are completely relaxed, and then her downturned face, the sorrow there, the open hands, like just everything here is communicating from a body language perspective, how we should be feeling, who these people are, what are they doing? And then of course, if you're able to look closer, even if you didn't know who this is, you would see hands in the holes and feet and, a lot of other clues as to what's happening here. But just body language at its most communicative, I feel like.
And one thing that's really awesome about this, if I can describe it as awesome, it maintains a sense of dynamism, of momentary movement. As static as it is, even, sitting, carrying a body, like it still has this kind of shift to the shoulders, this shift to the weight, and it makes it so much more lifelike than if it had just been this held pose. And it's just incredible that's communicated through sculpture, but something, for illustrators or, photographers, like we can bring those tiny moments of movement into our art very easily. And it really just elevates that body language.
Yeah. Something to keep in mind. So one of the things that illustrators often do is you have a line of motion. There are a couple of different names for it, but often before they sketch, you'll see an artist do something like this. Right. And this is kind of the line of motion. And then as they're building a pose, they'll follow that line for the movement and the dynamism and the emotion that's in it. And it's very, those are all here. Right. But also you have all of the movement in all of the clothing, like everything here has that, like, I think you're absolutely right. Like this is a snapshot like of a moment. Right. And we can't stay on it no matter how wonderful it is. So here's a really lovely piece. One of the new things at MoMA, one of the new things that has been collected. But I thought this was really interesting because unlike the last couple of images, this is really highly static. And so and the body language is highly static as well. And so I wanted to see what you guys think of in a situation like this, where we don't have a lot of that very clear movement. We still have body language. Like, this is still communicative. So what is it saying? If you're in the audience today, come on, guys, come on. I want to hear from you. It's no fun when you don't get to be here and hang out with us. So let me know what you guys think. Like, what is happening? How do you read body language in an image like this?
Well, I think
Homie
first
is
off,
stoned,
yeah,
stoned, hanging out with this hookah, just smoking the good. And no, there's just this contentment, this quietness. That's what I'm seeing anyway, regardless of the hookah. It's just this very kind of present, relaxed. Hands are such that they are kind of gripping the other. It's just a very relaxed posture, how you would stand if you were just waiting for somebody, but just happen to have, a half ounce of the good stuff.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I've never seen this. And the hookah gave me context first, because before I saw the hookah, I was like, what is going on here? So I think recognizing, what that even is going to give that kind of context to the body language a little bit too. But it's also like it does feel very orchestrated and posed, and I wonder, culturally, if that was required. Is this Turkish?
So it is just listed as Islamic art, portrait of a prince, possibly. So apparently they don't know for sure who painted it, possibly Mohammad Mirza. The description is a fine portrait of a young prince that was likely displayed in a niche in a palace interior as part of the overall architectural design program, that has all of the it's rendered in a refined style of the early 19th century that combined attention to detail and patterning of characteristic Persian painting with European conventions, mediums, and techniques.
Very interesting. Yeah, I feel like any explicit expression or even posture is very intentionally removed in this art style.
Yeah, I when I saw this, I thought, this is incredibly formal.
Yes.
Right? Like, this is very, very formal. Really so very still, and that kind of looking straight at the viewer, see me in all my finery kind of stuff. Yeah. So body language, and it's difficult because, like so much of Persian art, it's so intricate, and there's the patterns and the colors are so beautiful. But if we're to remove that and we have a person standing here this way, arms out, chest up, flat on, almost flat on, does it still say formal, rigid, uncomfortable? Matt said it reminds you more, Matt, of a kind of a chill, like, here I am doing my thing.
So the backstory that I've created for myself, right, with this prince.
I mean, when you smoke hookah, are you standing around looking all stiff?
So I'm like, puff, puff, pass. Don't hold on to that stuff. So the backstory that I have is, here's this prince that one of his duties is he's got to have his portrait done. It's got to be painted. It's got to be hung in the house, right? So just like any other late teenager, they do not want to be there, but they're just going to hang out and relax, and because it's got to get done because mom and dad said so, and I'm going to inherit this whole kingdom at some point, so I might as well do what they tell me. And that's kind of the story that I've built here, is that he's just hanging out relaxed. He's like, if I'm going to have to stand here for 7 hours while you paint my portrait, I'm going to smoke a little bit of something and hang out and be relaxed. And I mean, I know it's cultural and I'm adding a little bit of comedy to it, but that's the sense that I get from the body language, is just, all right, this isn't just something that's going to happen quickly. I'm just going to stand here and hang out. So there's this kind of like relaxed shoulder, like I said, with the hands a little bit lower. It just feels and reads a little bit more relaxed. Detached, I think, is really the word that I'm looking for.
I could see that.
I want Matt translations of all historical art now.
Oh, you don't want to go down this road.
I
Maybe
do.
we still have a lot to look at. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close these ones down since we have had a chance to see them. And let's see, where am I at here? All right, we're going to look at something that is not. I want to know if we can interpret body language when there isn't an actual recognizable body. There's something human in this, right? It's kind of disturbing. But can we interpret body language from this?
This brings me joy. Yes, because of the human need to anthropomorphize anything and everything to relate to it.
And so what is your interpretation?
So that's dependent on whether I think the blob of pixels in the middle is a face or not. I don't know if you guys see that as a
What
face.
if it is and what if it's not?
I mean, well, giving me despair either way. I mean, despair at losing one's head, or maybe grieving someone else's head. I don't know if it looks like that way to you guys, that it's a face.
Are you talking about here?
That.
Yeah.
I keep seeing that whole head expand that circle, and it looks like a pig with an apple in its mouth, right? Or a rose in its mouth.
Pig eye,
face.
big ear.
Yeah,
pig
exactly. And so there's this body that's leaning over it, and it's just, I still can't make out on the right, and it seems like the head is hung behind, and there's this arm that's reaching over the back of the pig, and they dropped a fork or something. Like there's just something going on with, exactly. And there's the chest, the belly, the back, right? And it's like it's leaning over this thing, whether that is an alive person or not with us anymore. I think I'm looking at the other visual clues, the roses falling on the floor. There's a little bit of decay. There are things falling off, right? That's contributing to me, and the reds and the dark tones to something a little bit sadder. So that's projecting into my mind that the bodies themselves must be in some of that state rather than joyous, right? So taking all those little clues and figuring out, what's the light highlighting? Where's the shadow? And is that playing into how I'm perceiving it versus looking at it and trying to determine exactly where body parts are? I think there's less of that and more of this looking at it as a whole, that there's this event that has just happened, this sadness, this pain, or despair or grief, like Becca said earlier, something to that effect. That's what it's leading me to, but I can't figure out what's going on other than she's looking at the back of a pig.
Yeah, I mean, so of course these are difficult. So this is obviously, if you couldn't tell, this is Midjourney. This is one of the first prompts I ever gave it with, which was Gothic Sleeping Beauty, because I just wanted to see what would happen. At this point, with the program, is still relatively new, is not doing a very good job rendering people. But I see the same thing as you, Matt. To me, this is a scapula, this is a shoulder, this is an armpit, this is a back, right? So like, and then of course we have like draping fabric. So like that's kind of my brain wants to interpret those things that way. But it still does it, right? There isn't an actual recognizable human in this frame, but our brain still imports that in there because we need to find those recognizable patterns. And like Becca said, we need to anthropomorphize everything. We can't help ourselves. And we will import human figures into places where they're not. Like this looks very much like a skull to me. But it's not. It's a nothing. It's a whole lot of smeary pixels that... when you look at it up close, maybe looks like an eyeball and a weird nose and some kind of mean mouth or something, right? It is not recognizable as a human anything, and yet it seems like a skull to me. So I think it's just really important for us as artists to remember that even if it's not there, we're going to bring it with us. We can't help it. If a human is looking at your images, they're going to import humanity into it. And if there's anything resembling like posture, we're going to interpret that as well. So if you're not paying attention to the fact that that's going to happen and you're using it unknowingly, just realize that people are going to be bringing that with them. Okay, I want to get I'm going to go really quickly and just ask folks to look at a few of these on their own, because I want to get to the ones that Becca has snatched up for us. But go take a look at these, things like The Kiss by Klimt, and see what you can intuit by the way that these people are interacting. There's been a kind of a lot of conjecture around, is he holding her and trapping her there? Does she want to be there? Or is this an actual consensual, happy, both people equally involved type of thing? Why can't we see his face? Why is her face so clear? Why is he holding her head the way that he is? All of these things, right? Go and ask some of those questions and see what you walk away with when it comes to body language.
That's how my husband kisses me when he's drunk. All over the side of my head.
Okay. So what do we catch here from body language? Saying good morning to people in Facebook land. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And this is Becca responding to said kiss.
Yeah.
With an uppercut.
So if you're hanging out in the audience today, if you're just joining us, we are talking about body language in art and the way that we as viewers are always going to be importing or inferring body language and emotion from, well, I can't say inferring body language. I should say inferring emotion and intent from the body language of the subject matter. And if there is not a human subject in there, we will find a way to anthropomorphize it and give it emotion via body language, because evolutionarily, that's the way our brain is built. We have to be able to have healthy social connections. And so we need to be able to interpret body language. And if we can't, that becomes a problem for us. So we will do it everywhere that we can. So we're looking at a few images and trying to see what we can understand of intent, etc., emotion, what's happening. How do we interpret the body language that we see? So this is a self-portrait by Picasso. What do we see here? What emotion, what, etc.? How do you interpret this body language? If you're hanging out in the audience today, we want to hear from you. So put that in the comments. This is contemplative to me.
And he's smiling.
Matt's trying to figure out how his fist is fitting that way.
So I'm trying to figure out, is it his or is it somebody else's, right? And I'm really trying to figure out where thumbs are, and
don't try to figure it out, man. He's making you look right through things. It doesn't make any sense. Claudia's here.
That to me is just trying to get the body language right. Is he just resting, or is he in an altercation? I think, yeah, there's this just kind of relaxed posture to it, this self-assuredness. Yeah, I've got one eye in the middle of my forehead, the other one down on my cheek. That's cool. I love me. I'm beautiful. I'm enough. And just kind of laying there. Yeah, to me, it's speaking very relaxed.
Yeah, I mean, I think so Claudia asking if this is two faces. So one of the really cool things about Picasso, one of the things he did that was so interesting is he would give you multiple perspectives at once. So this is a face turned to the side with the features in the front. So you're looking at both a front perspective and a side perspective at the same time. And often with things like hands, you're going to actually see the fingers on the wrong side of the hand, almost like you're seeing through the back of the hand. But this is face, hand, shoulder, arm, pencil, drawing pad. And one of the things that I like most about this is the fact that his shoulder's all up here. Because if you've ever leaned on anything, when you do this, like having your shoulder up here is just one of the things, you're kind of like, meh. I like this little bit of expressive body language.
It's the hint of the smile is what gets me. That's what I keep looking at.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. And facial expression is one of the things that we're going to cover for sure as we do visual literacy, because I feel like that is powerful enough that it kind of needs its own its whole own thing. So our friend in Facebook land saying, I don't know Picasso well, but I feel like I'm seeing two facial expression, one resulting in a violent response. And I think you might also too be seeing Matt's, this kind of fist, like,
Yeah, the
coming
more I
up
look
in
at
there.
these hands, the more, I don't know, surrealist it becomes.
Mm.
There's 5 fingers on the hand holding the pen, but none of them are holding the pen up.
Well,
What is happening?
I think what we've got here is this is a first knuckle
Is it? But it
and a
has
thumb.
nails.
So this is a thumb, right? This is a thumb. And then these are here.
So strange.
So
I like
strange.
it all.
And so even in something as almost unrecognizable, we still are seeing body language as something. Hi, Jean. Unfortunately, it didn't work, my friend, but you can still give it a try. But now we know it's you, so that's good. All right, let's see some more stuff here. All right, so most of us are familiar with the birth of Venus. That's a new one. Now somebody needs to make that. Can you make the birth of Venus, please, and turn all of these into chili beans? The birth of Venus
Got it.
by Botticelli. It's because it's Botticelli, and so I was like, in my head, I was like, this is Botticelli, the birth of Venus. Like, I don't know. Anyway.
I heard what Matt heard. So
it was a B. Bean with a B. Bravo. All right. So what do we see here? There's a lot. So we obviously have 4 different figures here, each of them in a different stature. What do we read by the body language that we see? And can we tell why? So first, I just want to point something out in case you don't know. Something fun. This pose is called a contrapposto. And you can do this with your photographic subject matters as well. It's super common. We'll see it in the David when we look at the David as well. It's the way that we stand when we're kind of alternating our joints so that our weight is distributed in a natural way, usually on the off. So they have to be contra to each other, right? Shoulders going this way, hips going this way, knees coming in, all that kind of thing. Anyway. Do you stand in contrapposto when you're uncomfortable?
no.
Not normally.
Not really, right? Like if I'm uncomfortable, I usually have my weight fairly evenly distributed just in case that discomfort moves to I need to flee. So I'm not kind of doing the one hip thing. This is the one hip thing for me is usually like, okay, I'm going to be here for a while. Kind of relax. So Sarah's saying, I just saw this in person a month ago. Oh, I'm so jealous, Sarah.
I love this painting.
Facebook friend saying she feels vulnerable, which I'm going to assume is Jean, that she feels vulnerable.
Well, here's the thing. Does she? And maybe this was just a choice by Botticelli, but even though she's covering herself, I mean, A, she's not doing a great job, and B, the hands draw that attention immediately to the thing she's trying to cover, right?
Yeah. Also, I think it's interesting if you look at the language of the hands as well. It's this. It's the Sue Bryce pose, right? It's not.
Totally.
It's not. Hiding. It's not. Her shoulders are not up. Like her elbows are not in. She's very much running her fingers across her chest, right?
Oh
Everything
no.
Oh
no, I'm naked.
Marilyn Monroe thing, right? Oh no. Just...
Go on. No, I think that pose absolutely conveys confidence to me. There's nothing. I don't think there's any level of shame or vulnerability here. This is just who I am, and I think culturally and probably at the time there was, let's cover a couple of things up here and there, right? Get a wider reach on Instagram, sort of thing, and I think it's just that confidence amidst all of these other things that are happening, that body language from the other subjects lends more to the story than this woman who's very comfortable with herself, just standing there being beautiful, right? There's these other things that, oh, let me, send elements this way. Let me cover this up. Let me, all of these other aspects and other emotions coming through the other body language rather than the main subject who's just kind of like, check out the flaming red hair. I'm dope. Like, I'm hanging out. And I love this. I've looked at this hundreds of times and I could just stare at it and find something new all the time. It's masterful.
That contrast is
He's got a future ahead of him. Yeah.
That Botticelli, he's got a bright future. So Jean's saying, I didn't see the hands. Now I feel like she's teasing. Right?
No, let's imagine she were just very full frontal, right? It wouldn't have that same level of sensuality as that teased. And I think that just makes it all the sexier for this goddess of love, right?
Yeah. So and I was saying now the woman on the right, is she rushing to cover her? And I think that is part of what makes that so interesting, right? She is more worried about Venus's honor than Venus is herself. There's no reason for her to cover up. Look at her. She's human perfection, right? So, and I think it's really interesting too. So then we have Zephyr over here. And what do we see happening here? Because this is relatively like she's rushing in, right? The wind is blowing her stuff. She's got that forward movement happening. She is trying to get that draped, that cloak, that fabric around our nude Venus here. And then Zephyr is over here, like coming in hot. And I am interested. Is he trying to blow her hair away? Is he like, get your stuff out of there? I'm trying to see.
He's
what's
exhausted.
happening.
He's flying with somebody on his back. He's exhausted. He didn't CrossFit for this, right? I think there's just that element of blowing the wind towards her. Hence, her hair is flying that certain way. Hence, the blanket's going that certain way, right? Bringing in that just to keep her uncovered, to show more of her. That's the way that I interpret it. So it's battling, one side or the other, trying to keep her exposed, and one is trying to cover her up.
Is he drying her off?
Sarah's saying what was fascinating for me is the way the couple is tangled, and look at their legs. Yeah, she has the wrong leg, doesn't she?
Maybe that's why he's breathing hard. He just got kicked.
She's got her opposing leg. So rather than having her legs kind of wrapped around him, this is actually, where's my brush? Where are you? Here we go. This is actually her right leg. This is her left leg.
She's twisted around in a sort of way, like her lower body's twisted the opposite direction of her upper body.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to do this on the couch and it's not
working.
No.
I don't know that that's a thing a human can actually do. All right, I want to quickly, we can't stay here forever, even though we could look at this forever. I'm just going to quickly look at a couple more pieces of this art just to see the differences here. One of the interesting things about Egyptian art is that humans are also, they are twisted in a way kind of similar to what we see Picasso do, which is this is not an actual normal body language, right? Their hips can be going one way and their shoulders going another way, and their hands also going in ways that don't make sense. If you look at and you read them, and there's always a real formality. You don't see comfortable looking Egyptian art. You never see Egyptian people like, sup, they're always very much symbolic, right? Symbolic of a human and not necessarily perfectly representative of a human. Also, like, you might think that these are ladies. They're not ladies. They're not ladies. That's not a lady. That's definitely not a lady. Men wore these same, they got fancy too.
Well, I'm certainly not going to assume anything, but I think the interesting thing in Egyptian art is hand placement, right? So regardless of the overall body language, the direction that hands are facing, the direction that fingers are, how many are up, how they're turned. You know, when you're looking at Egyptian art in that way, all of that makes all of those angles and components mean something. I can't sit here and interpret it, you know, but I know that surprised me in the amount of detail that went into each piece of a person's body when it was being drawn. Was all of those little details, exactly how a hand is placed, exactly how many fingers there are, where it's facing, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Always fascinated me. Just something else to look at in terms of body language in this period.
Well, here's
Yeah.
another weird thing about this art. A lot of this art like this, especially within like pyramids and tombs, this is not art for humans.
Right.
This is art for the dead. And it is not made for human interpretation.
Yeah. And yet you cannot help but have these humans. So look, is this, I gotta assume this is Anubis, eh?
Mm.
And or a servant of Anubis. Anyway, we have holding the hand of the figure. We have the scales being weighted. There's a feather on one side, in case you don't know much about Egyptology or anything like that. His heart's probably in here, in this little guy. So his heart, his soul is being weighed against a feather to see which weighs more, so he can be judged after death. And then this is either Horus or a servant of Horus or something along those lines. But this is the same fella. So we are moving in here to be judged, right? And if you don't know the things, there are taking notes. Good job taking notes. There are still these human figures that we have to interpret if we get to see it, because we can't help ourselves. Sculpture is my favorite for body language because sculptors are just so good.
So good.
What do we see here? If you're in the audience today, what do you see? What's happening with this body language?
I'm ready for Matt's interpretation. I'm going to make a greatest hits clip album.
Oh, Jesus. I don't even want to know where this is going on social media. No, I think I've got the two stories, right? One, she's rushing forward away from something. There's some wind blowing, and she's brushing the hair away from her ear. It could be brushing a tear away, and she's in pain and she's running away from something. But just given how she's leaning forward, it's an escape, a movement away from, with the wind, moving from left to right. There's this sense that she's moving into maybe an impending storm rather than running away from it. So yeah, I think there's some of those things there that I see. The closed eyes and sullen look in the mouth make me think that there was just some sort of dramatic, traumatic event, and she's moving away from that as quickly as she can, sad, still thinking about what happened. I'm lending myself to that, like, let me just keep myself together sort of feeling to it. Now you're probably going to tell me, oh, she's about to sweep a chimney, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But that's generally the feel that I get, is that she's moving away, trying to avoid shame or being upset, and just moving forward.
Let me tell you what the name of this piece is.
Oh God, it's going to be like the washerwoman.
No, Matt.
Amazing.
Are you ready? The Blind Flower Girl of Pompeii.
Yeah, she was having a bad day.
So Sarah's saying, I got enough. I don't want to hear it anymore, right? This is kind of backward motion with the hand near the ear, telling someone to talk to the hand, and storming out of a room. But really, like, your read was pretty damn spot on, man. Like,
seriously.
Yeah, I mean, she is. She clearly, like, her body language, she is moving away. There's her stick that she's holding, right? Which now we know how to read more of what that is. In fact, she's rushing away so much that her clothing is falling off. Like that's a symbol of her flight, right? And she can't hear what's happening, but she knows there's something. This is the stay away. Like Sarah was saying, I don't want this. That's that palm toward the bad thing, right?
Well, it's also it's leaning on the fact that she's navigating without her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's relying on hearing. She's leading people out of the disaster that is Pompeii after Mount Vesuvius ruins everything for everyone.
Stupid Vesuvius. So
Stupid
we don't have
volcano.
time, unfortunately, to see everything we could possibly see. I'm going to go ahead and drop off the screen share here, but hopefully just the things that we've had time to see this morning remind us of the power of body language, either to give us, help us understand what it is that the artist intended or what the characters are feeling, how we're supposed to interpret those things, how we're supposed to feel based on those things. Looking at something like the Pieta, you can't not feel, because your human mind is socially and emotionally connected to other people. And when you see something that is like a people displaying emotion, you are going to have an empathetic response to that, because that's what we needed in order to grow as a species, right? And we've talked before about how much of what we think of and talk about and learn about in visual literacy is tied to these evolutionary levers in our brain that as artists we get to pull and maneuver in order to cause emotion in the viewer, or have the viewer think or understand what it is that we're trying to communicate. And when you look at the body language in art and you start breaking those things down, they're almost always going to communicate well enough that you're in the right ballpark, right? Like you may not be exact, but you're going to be probably in the right ballpark. And then of course you're relying on those other aspects of visual literacy, like location, environment, clothing, props, all of that other stuff. You're relying on all of those things in order to finish that interpretation, so that even if it's meant to be slightly ambiguous or fully ambiguous, you are still going to be, you're not going to be ambiguous and like, is this happy or is this sad? What you're usually going to be something like, what kind of sadness is this, right? So unfortunately, we are a little bit over our time, so I got to hurry us out, but just want to say thank you so much to everybody for showing up today, for hanging out. I love it when you guys comment, so please do that. Like, that's the whole purpose of doing this. We will see you Thursday night. It is the second Thursday of the month, so we'll be together having more great conversations. And then, of course, Friday morning, same time, as we're finishing visual literacy at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 6 a.m. for the West Coast and 9 a.m. for the East Coast. Afternoon for our friends overseas. Come and hang out with us then. We hope to see you. In the meantime, go hang out in Facebook land or check out theartistforge.com for podcasts and blog posts and all kinds of interesting things. Until then, have a great one, everybody, and bye.